Greetings and salutations. Come to you with a bit of a quick video today. I was in 3D Printing Professor's stream today where he's modelling his low poly dinos, and someone was asking about problems with exporting STLs from Blender, and I did a bit of a quick search and found that sometimes the position or shape of things can get a bit warped if you're dealing with non-manifold meshes, and also noticed that the dinos that Joe was making was made up of multiple parts, and I suggested to Benjamin, who asked the question in the chat, to save the object prior to doing a boolean, and then exporting as one manifold mesh. And Joe actually perked up and so said he had no idea what I was talking about, and asked if I could show him what to do. So yeah, here's a little video on how to do that in Blender, and go over some of the reasons why it's good, and yeah, hope you find it handy. Okay, so we've got Blender open now, and bear with me because I'm very new to Blender, so may not be the most efficient way of doing certain things, but given I've only been using this for about half an hour, I think I'm doing alright. So anyway, we'll start by just creating some icospheres. This will just give us a very basic model with which to demonstrate this. Just given the meshes that Joe was working with were basically low poly objects and multiples. This will be a rougher approximation. Obviously I'm not going to go to the trouble of shaping it into a dinosaur, but we'll just chuck 5 or 6 in here so that we can get a good clear idea of what's going on. And one more, just for good luck. Okay, so we've got our icospheres looking a bit like a rock, I guess, and what we will do to first demonstrate the issue that I was discussing is if we select each of these icospheres, they're all selected. If we go to export STL, and we'll just save it on the desktop. Selection only, and let's call it multi ico. And export. Oops. So if we go import and our multi-ico, maximize that, and if we go up to view and toggle visibility, what you'll see is all of those internal faces. So the spheres are there in their entirety. And when it comes to 3D printing, internal faces like that can cause problems. It may depend on your slicer. It may also depend on your printer. But me personally, especially with resin printing, if you've got intersecting faces like that, so faces within the object, that can actually cause the entire model to just fall apart when it comes to printing. And because of the way my slicer works, what it actually does is, where it has faces that intersect each other, it actually creates a negative space within the model. So it'll just print nothing there, where it would normally print a solid surface if I was to print that completely solid. So to get around that, the easiest way to do it, since we've got all of the icospheres selected, you could do a Boolean union object by object, but obviously it's a lot quicker if you can do them all at once. So a little trick to doing them all at once is, since we've got all of those icospheres selected, you press Control J. That'll join them into one object, so you can see they've collapsed down to one icosphere. And then if we grab this cube and we rescale that so that it completely surrounds the icospheres, so it's completely encapsulated. And while we've got the cube selected, go up to our object modifiers, add modifier Boolean, leave it on intersect, pick the icospheres, but the trick here is to change that B mesh to carve. If you leave it on B mesh, it'll actually keep all of the internal faces, but with carve on, we can now move this aside, and if we turn our wireframe on, you can see the difference even in Blender. You can see all of those internal polygons, whereas this one doesn't have any of them. And if we export that to an STL, go to the desktop, and we'll call it Bool Ico, and selected is on. Export STL. If we come back in and open up another mesh mixer, hit OK, import, and we want Bool Ico. This time, if we toggle visibility on, you'll see there's none of those internal faces, and that's much better for printing. Now, the problem you'll often find with STLs that you download from Thingiverse or something is, like for this one for instance, it appears to be a solid mesh, and if we toggle visibility, you can see it doesn't look like, apart from around the belt area, like the arms and so forth don't have any internal faces. But we'll just toggle that visibility back on again, But if you go to the Analyze tool and click Inspect, you'll see all these little pink, purple dots come up, indicating problems. And in this particular model, these problems are due to non-manifold meshes, which basically means that there's a hole in the mesh, which will 9 times out of 10 probably result in an error in that mesh when it comes to printing. And when it comes to 3D printing, you really want a completely manifold watertight mesh, and these little pink dots indicate that that is not manifold. Whereas if we go to our booleaned icospheres, we'll toggle our visibility back on, go to Analyze, Inspect, no pink dots. So it's a completely watertight mesh with no internal faces, and that won't cause any problems. And from what I've read, if you have a watertight mesh like this with no internal faces, as compared to the previous version with all the internal faces, when you export as an STL, it will maintain its scale, position, everything. I think Benjamin was saying that when he exports STLs from Blender, they tend to get warped or skewed, or things move around. And from what I've read, that's the reason why that happens, is either a non-manifold mesh or it's made up of multiple parts. If there is a possibility that if you export and toggle or play with this scaling option, I think it's here. Yeah, you can apply the scene's units, but applying the scene units won't necessarily transfer across to your slicer, because my understanding is some slicers have their own scaling factors, and normally STLs don't actually contain units, as it were. So clicking that may or may not work depending on your slicer. If you have a problem with the model being too small in your slicer, Blender's default is 1 unit equals 1 meter, I think. So you can change this scale factor here on export, and that will change the scale when you import it into your slicer. That may affect the actual position if you've got multiple meshes within your file as well, but yeah, generally speaking, you'd be much better off to do the boolean so that you end up with one nice mesh with no internal faces like this one, because it just makes life easier for anyone who wants to print that file in the future. Alright, well, that'll about wraps it up for this video. If anyone's got any questions or anything, feel free to let me know. I may or may not know the answer, given that I've only now been using Blender for about half an hour. So yeah, ask away. If I do know the answer, I'll gladly help out. Otherwise, I'll see what I can find. Alright, catch you next time.